Hi, welcome to the video. We're so happy that you made it. We are going to be talking about each of Everdell's 5-box expansions. In this video, we won't be covering any of the extra components that you'll find in things like the complete collection, like the stickers you can put on the meeples or anything like that. We're just talking about the expansion content. So we'll be talking about what they add to the game mechanically, we'll be showing off a bunch of the art, and we are going to be presenting these expansions along with their lore. Everdell has a ton of world building that has been lovingly lavished upon it over the course of its life, and we think that you should know about it. When I present each expansion, I'll first tell you that expansion's story, where it fits into the Everdell timeline. Then I'll get into the mechanics that the expansion adds to the main game, the extra components, and then I'll share my thoughts about whether the expansion is fun to play with. At the end of the video, I will give you a ranking, where first I will rank the expansions in order of my personal preference. Then I will rank them in the order in which I think that you could buy them, if you want to buy them. Please keep in mind that the copies of Pearlbrook, Spirecrest, and the core game that you'll see in the B-roll are collector's editions. So if you want the content that you're seeing in the video, you'll need to make sure that you pick up those versions. If you're familiar with our channel, you're coming back for another video, be advised this will look a little different. My beautiful face will not be present in it. I decided to go for a voice-over format. This is a video of extraordinarily ambitious length and scope, and memorizing the entire script was too daunting of a prospect to consider. My actual face will not be on the screen, though my hands will be from time to time. Quickly, before we get started, we would like to thank the folks over at Tabletop Tycoon and Starling Games for providing us with this copy of Tales from the Green Acorn. This book was essential to our efforts to compile information about the beautiful world that James A. Wilson has created. If the world and art of Everdell are appealing to you, or if you find yourself curious about learning more after watching this video, don't hesitate to pick up a copy. Now, grab yourself a cup of something hot, get cozy, and prepare yourself for adventure in the Emerald Valley. The story of Everdell starts with a young mouse named Corin Evertail. As told by Poe, the most famous performer in the valley, except, of course, for Jor Goldwing, Corin was born to humble farmers in the sleepy little town of Drin, a rural agrarian community tucked away in the quiet countryside of the Kingdom of Gildan. He was very young when his father, whose name has been lost to time, was killed in one of Gildan's bloody conflicts with the snakes on their northern border. His mother subsequently succumbed to grief, leaving the young Evertail orphaned and alone in the labyrinthine streets of the crowded, stinking port city of Stormwillow, where he and his mother had previously fled after Drin had been overwhelmed by the serpent horde. A talented and bold mouse, even in his tender youth, Corin made a ramshackle living for himself in the port, relying on a band of rugged friends and what Poe tends to call his quick thinking and iron will, which is likely a generous way of saying that he engaged in activities of dubious legality to ensure his survival, which we wholeheartedly support. He had endured 3 years of scrappy living in Stormwillow when terrible news reached the city. The serpents of the northern wilds, the same bloodthirsty beasts that had claimed the life of his father, were again on the march, and rumors insisted that this time they were aiming to conquer the port. Gildan had tumbled into yet another war. Hundreds of creatures were about to die, hundreds more displaced, and this time Corin determined he would not stay to witness it. He mustered his comrades and proposed a daring plan. Together, they would venture into the wilderness beyond Stormwillow's walls to forge a kingdom of their own in a land uncorrupted by hate and ancient feuds. Of his fellows, only 3 agreed to accompany him on this quixotic quest. Fidget, an aspiring inventor, an uncharacteristically quiet squirrel named Nimble, and Terra, Corin's closest confidant. When this unlikely ensemble departed on a cold morning in Greensprout, they stepped through the gates of Stormwillow and into the paths of history. Corin Evertail's journey is often recounted as a fable for children. Every citizen of Everdell can describe to anyone willing to listen how, over the course of 9 torturous months, he braved the Dune Waste Desert, and with the aid of King Rydian, steward of the Spirecrest Mountains, navigated that range's treacherous paths, a bitter adventure that claimed the life of Terra. The moment he stood upon the ruins of Spire and gazed awestruck upon the vibrant swards of Everdell for the first time is inscribed into the imagination of every young valley inhabitant. The fervent hope that had compelled them to venture into the wilds, dimmed by 9 months of grueling hardship, swelled back to life as the adventurers entered the valley. The delicate crispness of the air, as bracing as it was soothing, the springing of lush grass beneath their paws, the sunlight that tingled gently in their fur, awoke dreams of sun-drenched farms, small cottages, and cozy winter evenings that had long dozed in their hearts. As they rested in the scant shade of a young sapling in the meadow's center, which Corin had already begun to call the Evertree, not one of them doubted that they had finally found home. Each of Everdell's 6-box releases captures a moment in Everdell's history, and I'm going to present them to you as they fit into the timeline. As that's the case, I'll begin with a high-level overview of Everdell history before we plunge into the game's first expansion, Pearlbrook. Corin Evertail was appointed Everdell's first king soon after he and his friends had settled in the meadow. He ruled for the next 3 decades, laying the groundwork for the town's infrastructure and forming the Council of Elders, which I believe is a legislative body that functions as a check to monarchical power akin to a parliament, but I'm not entirely sure. A devastating epidemic of the Black Root Plague swept through the realm on the 30th year of his reign, and he was one of its many victims, dying in the year 32. And that's 32 years after he founded Everdell, by the way, which are called Ever Years. I'm just calling them years. His widow, Queen Millie Green, took the throne after his death and ruled until she died 4 years later, in 36. The couple died childless. Their death cast the nascent community into its first succession crisis, which was quickly and peacefully resolved by the Council of Elders, who swiftly elected Finn Nobletail to the kingship. Nobletail took the throne in 37. His tenure proved bloody, completely antithetical to Corin's vision of a region untroubled by violent conflict, as it was dominated by a 4-year war with an encroaching faction of Hornets. He passed away a year after declaring victory in this protracted and costly struggle, passing the throne to his daughter, the beautiful Amilla Glistendew. Glistendew's rise to power heralded an era of peace and prosperity, unknown to the valley since before the dark days of the Black Root Plague. Everdell thrived under her nurturing touch, and the common folk loved her. Their adoration only grew as she married Nibbles McGregor of the famous McGregor farming family, following the passing of her husband in 51. By the time she died in the comfort of Strongroot Castle in 72, after 30 years of plenty, Everdell was exploding. Food was abundant, a new sport called Skirble was becoming incredibly popular, and the valley's population was growing at an unprecedented rate. With these positive developments tumbled a host of questions, all of which landed squarely in the lap of Glistendew's heir, North McGregor. Was Everdell equipped to support such a large population? Were the whisperings that the Evertree was in poor health, that its roots were drying out, be true? If they were, what disasters did the decay of Everdell's most treasured landmark portend? The first years of King North's reign were troubled. The rat community, long disgruntled with the monarchy, staged an uprising masterminded by a young rat named Rugwort, then known as little more than an eccentric radical. The rebellion was put down, and King North strengthened his military presence on the valley's borders. Gildan, with whom Queen Millie Green had controversially established diplomatic relations a year following Corin's death, requested assistance in yet another war against its neighbors soon after, and King North deployed troops to that kingdom in response. In this time of overcrowding, domestic unrest, and foreign wars, Everdell citizens began to form bands and strike out to seek their fortunes in the outer wilds. As recorded by Sir Vilminius Stroke on the 12th of Hope Watch 79, "Not one, but 2 companies of critters have left the settlement. Their intentions are clear: to establish new cities elsewhere." His words were followed by the establishment of the 4 cities, the event that players act out in the original game of Everdell. The game covers this mass emigration from the original Everdell settlement and the subsequent construction of cities in the area, while the solo mode explores Rugwort's attempts to capitalize on the turbulence of the times to fulfill his political ambitions, launched in 73, 80, and 87, respectively. Now that you're caught up on the story that leads up to the original Everdell, let's forge into the game's first expansion, Pearlbrook. Pearlbrook is the only expansion that actually does not take place following the events featured in the base game. Instead, it transports players to the early years of the valley, when cities were smaller and the fledgling kingdom was just beginning to discover that the forests around them were not as uninhabited as they had appeared to be when Corin first arrived. Eager to know more of this strange new world, Corin appointed a company of cartographers led by the intrepid Arta Thistlemark to document the lands within and beyond the meadow. The band of mapmakers ranged deep into the wood. On the 9th day of their expedition, they stopped to drink from the deep, clear waters of a stream, where they unwittingly initiated a surprising encounter. "And then I saw it," Thistlemark wrote, "something moving in the water. A spindly pink hand reached for a rock, followed by the strangest head I'd ever seen. We watched each other for several moments before the creature dove back into the water." The creature, as would later be discovered, was an axolotl, and Thistlemark and her colleagues had just met their first citizen of the luminous city of Pearlbrook. The Pearlbrook expansion allows players to relive the establishment of social and commercial ties between Pearlbrook and the Everdell community that occurred in the years following Thistlemark's experience. It adds the river to Everdell's map, populated with 2 Pearlbrook residents and 2 locations. As one might expect, one's regular critters cannot access the river. Only a frog ambassador can do so on their behalf, and then only after their community has attained a sufficient degree of economic development. Accessing the river allows a player to acquire Pearlbrook's precious export, pearls. Once obtained, these pearls can be spent to fund adornments, which grant powerful effects when you play them, as well as tantalizing scoring opportunities for the end of the game. They can also be used to beautify your city with wonders, which, while expensive, award massive amounts of points to the players skilled enough to erect them. In addition to the wonders, adornments, and pearls, Pearlbrook depicts the cultural exchange that unfolded between the 2 regions during this era of Everdell history by adding Pearlbrook cards to the main deck and allowing players to experience the valley as platypuses, otters, axolotls, and starlings. To further embed the player experience within this period of Everdell's history, town sizes in this expansion are typically reduced as wonders command the lion's share of resources. The smaller towns, coupled with the fashioning of iconic landmarks such as the Hope Watch Gate and Mistrise Fountain, bring to life a time of excitement, growth, and the convergence of diverse peoples. Adding Pearlbrook to Everdell substantially changes the game's feel, as player attention is invariably sucked into the task of constructing wonders. Traditionally important avenues to victory, such as events or filling out your city, while still valuable, will likely seem less exciting compared to building one of these majesties of creation that cast all in shadow with their eye-popping point totals. If you aren't wooed by those big numbers and you want to stick with your familiar strategies of achieving special events and basic events, well, you're in for an ugly surprise. The wonders refuse to be ignored, you see. They're quite insistent about demanding your attention, so insistent, in fact, that you cannot play around them. If one player's gunning for a wonder, you'll have to build one, at least a small one, or risk losing the game. And since all wonders require at least 1 pearl, and pearls are difficult to come by, chances are most of your efforts will be tied up in that endeavor. This means that Everdell paired with Pearlbrook can feel, especially in the first few plays, like it has been reduced to a crass race to build the biggest wonder. While this isn't the case in the long run, repeated plays will demonstrate that clever resource management as well as the construction of smaller wonders can allow players to outflank those who go after Starfall's Flame or Sunblaze Bridge. That early impression can leave a bad taste in players' mouths, especially if they are expecting more of the same experience they got with the original game. Pearlbrook, however, isn't interested in delivering more of the same. In fact, it completely shifts Everdell's focus to alternative resources and endgame scoring opportunities. Terry Hare is a formidable figure in Everdell. He owns the largest general store of all time, built for the first time in 70 and then again in 71 after it burned down. When his son Torin was born, it was universally expected that he would follow in his father's paw steps, perhaps to take over the family business. It was not to be. Torin grew up shy, quiet, and introspective, with an aptitude for drawing. He could often be found gazing in rapt silence at the distant ridges of the Spirecrest Mountains, spirited away by visions of adventure. Terry was a kindly father, mindful of his son's talent. "Torin," he said when the young Hare was approaching adulthood, "you were never meant to follow in my prints, to live a comfortable life as a shopkeeper. You were born for greater things." As for what great things he was meant for, none could tell until a tornado devastated the valley, uprooting crops, destroying homes, and shattering families. Everdell reeled in the wake of the destruction. Torin's time had come. In these darkest of times, he would return hope to his people. Flanked by two of his dearest friends, Chibblesqueak and Rose, Torin set off on a bold quest to find the legendary specter he felt confident could equip the valley with the material they needed to rebuild. King Run, the fabled sovereign of the Spirecrest Mountains, son of King Rydian, who had aided Corin Evertail in his crossing of the mountains decades prior. The Spirecrest Mountains had not grown kinder since those distant days, and Torin's journey was perilous. Spirecrest is set during this desperate phase of the Everdell story. The destruction of community infrastructure wrought by the tornado is added to the game by way of weather effect cards that demonstrate the region's increased vulnerability to the elements. Weather effects shift with the seasons, and each brings a new hardship. A deep freeze in winter may render the forest impassable, and lightning storms in spring can hamper construction efforts. From spates of dense fog to droughts to devastating wildfires, Spirecrest exposes you to the cruel whims of nature like no other Everdell box has. As Everdell suffers, Torin Hare and his friends push deeper into the Spirecrest Mountains, with each season drawing them farther along in their search for aid. When you take the Prepare for Season action with Spirecrest, you'll advance your Explorer, carved to resemble Torin, one space. At your new location, you'll reveal the top 3 cards of that location's encounter deck. These cards inform you of what Torin's expedition discovered there. Many of these will be locations, either paths Torin walked, or cities where he presumably petitioned for assistance. But some will be big critters. If you choose to befriend these affable beasts, they will go directly to your city where they'll do their best to make themselves useful. You can choose to leave the meeples as they are, simply replacing one of your normal workers, or you can slip a tiny plastic saddle onto them, which your meeple can actually ride. When your big critter meeple is dispatched to a worker location, they'll trigger a special effect, typically very powerful. When your traveler advances, you'll also select one of several landmarks for them to pass through on their route to the next seasonal waystone. You'll add this to an expedition track in front of you. At the end of the game, you'll take your traveler and place it on the leftmost tile in your expedition track. You'll then score points for each stage of the expedition the traveler can successfully navigate through, which will be determined by how many you can finance with your leftover resources. As with Pearlbrook, Spirecrest adds a layer of complexity to Everdell's resource puzzle, but where Pearlbrook transforms the game's core experience, making it feel like a very different game altogether, Spirecrest feels much more like a conventional expansion. It's giving you Everdell with a lot of extra stuff bolted on. This makes for a more sprawling, more complex experience. The Traveler content adds a good deal of excitement to the prepare for season action. Selecting your next map tile is a juicy strategic choice. Flipping the discovery cards is immensely exciting for the player who gets to choose one. Each discovery card adds compelling twists to your gameplay, and your critters get to ride on large animals, which is one of the most adorable gameplay features in all of board gaming. The weather effects add another variable to planning out your city. They're thematic, but they can feel a touch fiddly. It's easy to forget which effect currently applies to you, or that they're even in play at all. They're definitely more rewarding and more fun to play with for experienced players who feel like they've mastered the content in the core box. The final scoring step at the end of the game, introduced with the expeditions, is a great way to siphon off those extra resources people tend to have lying around after play has concluded. Executing every step of an expedition after a few rounds of careful planning is always satisfying, and it's fun to get a few bonus points too if you just happen to have an extra pebble or two in your vicinity after you've stopped taking turns. Spirecrest is an immersive expansion to Everdell, rich with opportunities for storytelling and strategy. It's deeply thematic and includes some of my favorite art in the series. That said, it's a bit much to manage at times, and it tends to contribute significantly to the game's length. 99 years after Corin Evertail carved Everdell into a stone near the base of the sapling we now call the Evertree, King North McGregor threw a party. And why not? Everdell had been around for 100 years, after all, and he had been king for nearly 28 of them. What he called the Bellfaire, a festival that he proclaimed would last the entire year, was a celebration of epic proportion. Bellfaire contains in its slim box an avalanche of modular content that can be added to any game of Everdell. In addition to these modules, it includes formal rules for games with 5 to 6 players, delightfully illustrated player boards, a slew of new forest locations and some fresh special events, a new basic event, meeples for both cardinals and toads, and a board overlay that you can use in place of the 3D Evertree onto the modules. This is the market. It allows players to swap out and gain resources, adding unprecedented flexibility to resource management. The market is great. These are the Garland Awards. These add point-scoring incentives to the game, akin to special and basic events. They boost the score of the player who fulfills their requirements best at the conclusion of the game. These add an overtly competitive edge to the game, and they're a lot of fun. And these are perhaps the flashiest addition to the game in this box, Critter Powers. That's right, if you choose the foxes now, that means you can actually do foxy things that the moles can't do. You can cook up sinister plans as the axolotls, or get responsible with the turtles, or finally live out your dreams of becoming Rugwort's henchrat. These player powers spruce up gameplay a ton, and I know what you're thinking, are they balanced? And well, most of them are just fine. There is a lot going on in Bellfaire, just like you'd expect from the biggest rager of the Everdell century. It fails to bring the same atmosphere to your table as, say, Pearlbrook, but a lot of undeniably fun ideas are crammed into this box. The player powers alone are sufficient to justify its cost as they revitalize every item in your collection. If you play Everdell very frequently, Bellfaire is an excellent, budget-friendly purchase to get more mileage out of everything you own. In the year 103, the cunning spider Nightweave decided to stop lurking in the depths of the Mistwood and actually attempt to usurp King North, which, as Rugwort could have told her, was a fool's errand. But I suppose Rugwort's credibility had sort of waned after not 3, not 4, but 5 failed attempts to capture the throne, so maybe if he had told her, it wouldn't have made a difference. You know, it's a bit sad. Actually, can we just talk about Rugwort for a second? I know he's built up to be a villain, but, I mean, he was offering himself to the kingdom as an alternative to North McGregor, the guy who got Everdell mixed up in a foreign war and couldn't rebuild his kingdom after a natural disaster without support from the king of another country. It's just like, what if he was on the right track? You know? Would the postal pigeons have gone on strike if Rugwort had been in charge? I just can't quite help but wonder that.
And I can't put my finger on what exactly puts me off about this whole, Rugwort is the bad guy business. It smacks of propaganda. Rugwort was a political visionary, there, I said it. And yeah, he was raising taxes, but how do you know he wasn't doing that just to, start a scholarship for disadvantaged rats seeking a university education or something? # free Rugwort. Also, okay, guys, you need to know this. Go back to Corin's odyssey from Stormwillow to Everdell, just for a hot second. Okay, so they've been on the trail for a bit, and then they get ambushed by a group of desert foxes who take them prisoner. Very scary. And they're taken to a place called Fortress Frenic, where they're sold into slavery. They're mining pebbles from a nearby cliff, and guess who Corin meets in the quarry? A thin and haggard slave, who is, what? A mouse? Nope, he's a rat. And you know what Corin and his pals do? They collaborate with this rat on an escape plan. He's totally involved with hashing out every step of it. He's gonna escape with them. The day arrives, they've got everything together, and things go sideways. Corin is supposed to stage some kind of distraction or something, and he's too weak to do it. Guards are closing in around them, and the rat throws himself at the guards. And he's like, go, I'll hold him off. So Corin and his friends book it out of the prison, and they just leave him behind. Yeah, they just ditch him. They leave him in the slave prison where people suffer and die. They're outside of the prison being chased, and Corin's just like, oh, well, I guess we better leave the rat in the slave prison. So why do I bring this up? Because this rat's name was Rug. Yeah, as in Rugwort. Rug was totally Rugwort's dad. And I don't care if that's not supported by any of the records in the rulebooks or in Tales of the Green Acorn. Rugwort was trying to avenge his dad, who was abandoned by his friends and left for dead in a prison. That, and he is a political visionary. Anyway, in the year 103, King North is out on a journey, and then Nightweave and her spiderlings, they swarm the Evertree. They force everyone out of it. They coat it in cobwebs. Messengers are dispatched to scour the realm for North, because everyone's like, where's North? But he can't be found. 3 days following her takeover of the Evertree, she summons everyone to the tree for a special meeting where she informs them that, oh no, King North has been killed by locusts. She has arrived to protect the valley from this terrible threat. People try to resist her and are killed, legit. She just takes people out, and Everdell just plunges into darkness. But deep in the forest, the monks are hidden in their monasteries, and they're chilling. They're watching all this go down. And one of them's taking a nap, and he gets a vision of a creepy cave in the forest. He wakes up and he's like, fellow monks, I saw a vision of a creepy cave in the forest. We gotta go find it. So he gathers them up, and they go and find the cave, and they find King North in there. He's not dead. The locust didn't kill him. Plot twist. They free King North, and North starts to organize an army. After months of preparation, King North and his ragtag army of rebels confront Nightweave, and they have a battle that rages for 5 days. They defeat her, but Nightweave is left alive. She scurries back into the forest mists. In the Mistwood expansion, Nightweave is an AI that you can play against by yourself or with another player, and she's a significant improvement over the previous solo system, and no, not just because the last system happened to exist at the expense of Rugwort the Misunderstood Pariah. She is much more clever than the previous AI, sorry Ruggy, but she's simple to manage. To take a turn with her, you just flip a card and do what it says. If you get tired of winning against her, you can mix things up by tossing in one of her plots or plans, which add twists of varying degrees of horror to your game. She can even change her personality, which adds yet another layer to her playstyle. Nightweave is a tightly designed addition to the game that presents challenges of all levels of nastiness to any player brave enough to test their mettle against her. Several new Legends cards and a handful of Corrin Evertail cards add some value to her box. The Legends are a riot, but the Evertail cards are absolutely busted. If you play Everdell by yourself, this is a must-buy, with the only caveat being that the rulebook for it is a bit of a beast. In the year 90, eccentric bat Teasel Spink emerged from his laboratory deep in the Spirecrest Mountains with an invention that changed Everdell forever. Steam power. King North MacGregor, intrigued by this technology, invested copious amounts of the nation's wealth into it, and within 4 short years, the first steam-powered locomotive was unveiled. Dozens of laborers were hired to construct miles of track, connecting communities in the valley. A rail line through the Spirecrest Mountains was opened with the completion of the Grumble Tunnel in 101, and in 102, 1,000 passengers traveled along this convenient route to see the Emerald Valley. Of those travelers, many visited Everdell's original city, Newleaf. Tons of critters poured into towns during this period in Everdell's history, looking to forge a life for themselves or just do some sightseeing. The influx of fresh talent into Everdell's population in this era is reflected in the addition of a whopping 59 cards to the main deck, all of them highlighting the best and brightest of these newly minted citizens. Poets, lamplighters, magicians, inventors, millers, critters large and small, of every cultural and professional background you can think of, and probably more. Also, the bumblebees are here, not the hornets of course, they were thrashed by King Nobletail back in the 30s. And they're wearing knitted scarves, and you know what, forget what this expansion's about, you just need to buy this box. They've got fresh baked bread, for goodness sake. The train board has arrived, and with it a tidal wave of cash. 3 cards are arranged face up on it, with a train car tile being set next to each. These cards can be played like any in the meadow, but when you add one to your city, you also collect the resources printed on the train car tile adjacent to that card. This absolutely insane space, the knoll, allows you to cycle your available options by knocking 3 cards from the meadow and or the station, refilling those slots, then draw 3 cards from the meadow and or the station, and then collect the resources printed on any of the train cars. It's sheer craziness, but that's not the end of it. Not by far. Visitors arrive in the station every day. You can send along one of your workers to fetch them from the station like an Uber driver and shuttle them to your town, where they'll politely look around. Each visitor will have specific items they'd like to see on their vacation, so if you add those items to your town before the end of the game, you'll score a tidy amount of points for giving them a great holiday. Filling up your city has never been easier thanks to these golden occupied tokens, and oh boy, I loved the tiny doors before, but these are on another level. You can spend a golden occupied token to install any critter into a construction of a particular color, which is extremely powerful. You only get 3 tokens per game though, so you'll have to deploy them wisely. Tickets are an optional module that allow you to transfer your deployed workers to new locations, getting a second use out of them before you have to call them back for the season. Reservation tokens are another optional module. They allow you to reserve cards from the meadow once per season and set them aside to be constructed later. That's cool. Newleaf also adds 2 brand new basic events you can drizzle into your games, like Expensive Hot Sauce, the Big City event, which rewards you for packing 15 cards into your city, and the Scenic Flight event, which at long last allows players to score a basic event for having purple cards in their city. Newleaf is the box to get if you like watching numbers climb endlessly skyward. Everdell expansions tend to constrict your decision-making space by sapping resources from you, but Newleaf is by far the opposite. It greets you with open arms and a hearty backslap before cramming your shirt full of more cash than you can possibly spend in your life. At the same time, it's also bustling and industrial in a way that I am unaccustomed to associate with Everdell. When I play with Newleaf, I think back to smaller towns, serene villages, isolated farms silently flourishing on languid summer afternoons, and I feel a peculiar sort of sadness, like I've lost something that I need to go find. Perhaps that's silly. In fact, it is silly. I'm just a purist. But perhaps that's also not too far removed from the feeling that compelled Corin Everdell to leave Stormwillow all those years ago in search of a place to call home. And that, dear friend, is the story of Everdell, as told across its many expansions. But which expansions do I personally find best, and which do I think most merit your attention? I'll give you two lists. The first will be my personal list of expansions that I like. And the second list will be the order in which I think you should buy them. Okay, let's do my personal list. Number 5. We got Mistwood. This is a great single-player addition to the game, but I just don't typically play Everdell by myself. That said, I love the legends in the box. Number 4, we got Bellfaire. Excellent modules, lots of things to play with. The box just doesn't enhance the ambiance of the gameplay quite as much as other offerings, and atmosphere is one of the main reasons I play Everdell. Number 3, we got Newleaf. It's great gameplay, don't get me wrong. The theme just grates on me a teeny bit. Number 2, Spirecrest. I can't express how much I adore the art in this expansion. It's a little too fussy. And then number 1, Pearlbrook. Yeah. The art, it's sumptuous. The expansion changes up the game without adding a ton of extra rules or like a lot of length. I like it. Now for the order in which I think you should buy them. Obviously this is going to depend on what you like about Everdell, but if you were to just come up to me and be like, hey, I love this game and I want to buy more of it, then I would say go get Newleaf, number 1. This expansion gives you more resources to work with and more cards to explore, so it's a natural next step if you're loving Everdell's resource economy and you want to dial things up. Number 2, Bellfaire. It's more of the same with several twists you can throw in when you want to spice things up. Asymmetric player powers are a great time, and it's the cheapest box out there. If you've played Everdell quite a lot and you're comfortable with it, this is a safe choice. After you get Bellfaire, number 3, Spirecrest. Unparalleled atmosphere, doesn't deviate too much from the fundamental Everdell formula. It strains your resources with weather effects while giving you cool powers with the big critters. Number 4, Pearlbrook. The artwork is sublime, but the added content tampers so much with basic Everdell that it creates a substantively different game. Purchase if you're tired of the same old resource management and you want to shake things up. Number 5, yeah, it's Mistwood. Buy for the legends. And, you know, if you're a solo player, move this up to the number 1 slot. You have made it to the end of the video. Thanks so much for coming along with me on this journey through the enchanted lands of Everdell. If you thought this video was cool, please give us a subscribe. Thanks for giving this new format a shot. I thought it was kind of fun to make it, so if you thought it was fun to watch, put that in the comments section, and we'll do this again. And we will see you in the next one.